Just over 2 weeks ago, I released a video that covered the gayest states in the USA, and many of you loved it. In fact, I received quite a few requests to make a follow-up video covering European countries, and well, here we are. Now, generally speaking, I have found that reliable and detailed demographic data is far more abundant for the USA than for most European countries. And I was worried that it would be difficult to find a study that was as rigorous as the one I drew from in the creation of the Most LGBTQ States video. But thankfully, after much research, I found an incredible resource from Ipsos that compiled a similar array of statistics as the PRRI study had for the USA. Now, for those who don't know, Ipsos is widely considered to be one of the top 5 most reliable and respected pollsters in the world. And, as I only bring the very highest quality data to you all, I was thrilled to discover this particular LGBTQ-focused report from them. For those who wish to dig deeper into the numbers on your own, I will link the study in the description, as we only have time in this video to discuss the very queerest of countries on the continent. I also feel the need to quickly highlight again that this video is not about the most LGBTQ-friendly European countries, but rather the countries where the highest percentage of respondents in the study identified as part of the community. If you are curious about which countries have the best laws in relation to LGBTQ rights and the most favorable public opinion results, feel free to check out one of these other videos later. But for now, and without any further delay, let us dive into the current gayest countries on the European continent. Our journey today begins in northwestern Europe with the United Kingdom, a country where 12% of the overall adult population is openly LGBTQ, with 10% of the UK's population being either gay, lesbian, bisexual, or asexual, and 2% being either transgender or non-binary. This makes the UK tied with the next country on this list for the title of 5th most LGBTQ country in Europe. The same Ipsos study also found that 64% of those polled supported marriage equality, and an additional 14% of individuals were in favor of other forms of legal recognition for queer couples, but not marriage. Only 13% of those polled were strictly against any recognition of LGBTQ relationships. Additionally, 77% of respondents supported measures to protect trans people from discrimination, with 15% opposed to any legal protections. So, for any TERF who happens to find this video, never forget that you are in a very small minority of angry, small-minded little shits, and most of the country does not share your blind prejudice. Also, notably, for the 12% of people in the UK who are LGBTQ, the overall situation is decent but far from perfect, as the country currently ranks 30th in the world for queer rights according to Equaldex, just behind Thailand and 1 point ahead of the USA. Last year's election of a new Labour government gave many in the community hope that the country would move in a more progressive direction than had been the case under the previous Conservative leadership. But in reality, the new government has been more of the same, and LGBTQ rights in the country continue on a downward spiral, with some truly terrible developments happening just in the last couple months alone. As someone who has spent a fair amount of time in the UK over the years, this erosion of basic rights is beyond disturbing, and has caused me to suspend any plans to visit again until these wrongs are one day made right. Still, I do have hope. 12% of the country's population of 69 million amounts to roughly 8.2 million LGBTQ people, and hopefully we will soon see a powerful mobilization that ends the years-long backwards trend in the country so that the UK can once again live up to the values it claims to hold. Moving south now to continental Europe, we arrive in France. Like the UK, France is also 12% LGBTQ, which translates to roughly 8 million out of France's total population of 67 million. So, yes, there are more queer people in France than the entire population of countries like Bulgaria or Serbia. Of these 8 million LGBTQ French people, 9% are lesbian, gay, bisexual, pan, or ace, and a further 3% are either trans or non-binary. 66% of those polled expressed full support for marriage equality, 2% more than in the UK, and only 10% of respondents in France were completely opposed to any legal recognition of queer couples. Also, 77% of people in France were supportive of anti-discrimination laws that protect trans people specifically, with only 14% of those polled being against such legislation. While similar to the UK on most fronts according to this Ipsos poll, the picture is quite different when we look at overall LGBTQ rights, as France comes in 19th globally according to Equaldex, 11 places higher than the UK. This is driven in large part by France having far superior legislation around trans rights in particular, with all restrictions on changing one's legal gender being dropped back in 2018, and gender-affirming care being accessible since 1975. Compared to the UK, where it is still restricted. Yes, you heard that correctly, the UK is 50 years behind France in terms of trans healthcare. Last year, France narrowly escaped a far-right government takeover, and now the left, center, and far-right each hold about one-third of the country's seats in parliament. It seems for now that the center and left are holding strong, and that France should remain a safe country for LGBTQ people. Although, the rise of the far right is a worrying trend that we must be vigilant of in the years ahead, as they have explicitly stated their desire to end marriage equality and roll back a wide array of other basic rights. As someone who has had the chance to spend time in many French cities, I can honestly say that the country's reputation for being rude and self-important is largely overblown these days. Last year, on the anniversary of D-Day, I had the opportunity to visit much of Normandy with my grandfather, who was visiting Europe from the US. On this trip, I was reminded of just how pleasant and friendly France can be. We now head northeast, one country over, until we arrive in Germany, Europe's most populated country, home to 83 million people. Nearly 11 million of which are LGBTQ, making up 13% of the country's total population. Of these, 9% identify their sexuality as being something other than heterosexual, and 4% are openly trans or non-binary. Interestingly, this means that Germany is twice as trans as the UK, which is currently at just 2%. The Ipsos study also found that 62% of German respondents supported marriage equality, with another 12% in favor of non-marriage legal recognition. Just 13% of individuals polled in the country were completely opposed to either option. On the subject of anti-discrimination protections for trans people, just 68% of Germans expressed support, a number that is surprisingly 9 points less than in the UK, in which 77% of people believed in such protections. But despite the underwhelming findings on public opinion from this study, Germany remains an exceptionally good country for LGBTQ people to call home, and it's currently tied with Chile as the 5th best country in the world for queer rights and acceptance, according to Equaldex. In fact, just last November, the German parliament passed one of the world's strongest self-determination laws, and makes the country one of the very best places on Earth to be trans. This same bill also formally recognizes non-binary people and allows them to obtain correct documentation. Now, I will note that this February, a more conservative coalition government was elected in Germany, comprised of the center-right CDU-CSU and the center-left SPD. And while this coalition will likely not backtrack on queer rights, they will also not be as committed to them as the previous coalition. Still, just the fact that the radical far-right AfD was kept out of power, despite gaining a terrifyingly high 20% of the vote, is a huge win for Germany, Europe, and the world. Furthermore, this latest election also cements the country as a safe and stable place for LGBTQ people in the foreseeable future. I've got to add that Germany is a country I have come to love over the years, and at the start of 2025, I had the chance to visit again and stay for an entire month in the Dusseldorf area. The fact that Germany is still committed to human rights and individual liberty gives me immense hope in the face of places like the US and UK moving backwards. At 13% LGBTQ, Germany is not only the 4th queerest country in all of Europe, but, with its incredible laws, it is also one of the very best for our people too. Staying in the region now, but moving just a little bit to the west, we arrive in the Netherlands, a country where 14% of the population is openly LGBTQ. Now, interestingly, the country has the 3rd highest ratio of non-heterosexual people in the world at 12%, whereas just 2% of people in the Netherlands are trans or non-binary. The study also found that 80% of those polled fully supported marriage equality, and only 8% of respondents were completely against any legal recognition of queer couples. Additionally, a similar 78% of people are in favor of anti-discrimination laws that safeguard trans people's equal access to society, with just 14% opposed to such protections. Now, you may notice that the public opinion in the Netherlands has proven to be more supportive on both questions than any of the other 3 countries we have covered. Well, I will also note that the legal situation is quite excellent as well, as the country currently ranks 9th in the world for LGBTQ rights according to Equaldex. Some of you may also know that the Netherlands was the first country on Earth to introduce marriage equality back in 2001, a move that I am certain motivated other countries to follow. Now, I will add that in 2023, some right-wing parties did essentially win the election, and there are ongoing fears that this could lead to an erasure of some fundamental rights. But, at least for now, no key areas of LGBTQ-related legislation have been altered, and it seems that unlike other right-wing governments around the world, those in the Netherlands are less obsessed with us. Although, I will point out that in 2022, various right-wing parties that are now in government did oppose a bill that aimed to simplify the process of changing one's legal gender. So, for now, the 2013 law that requires a medical diagnosis stands. Still, the Netherlands is, in my opinion, truly one of the very best countries, not only in Europe, but in the world more broadly. Right up there with the Nordic countries, at least in my book. The 2023 election was massively disappointing, and I hope in the years ahead the country can get back to its roots as one of the most progressive and future-oriented countries on Earth. Still, I find it astounding that the Netherlands remains a more LGBTQ-friendly country, even with a right-wing coalition in power, than most other countries are when they are led by progressive parties. Perhaps it just shows how awesome this country truly is. I've had the chance to visit almost every corner of the Netherlands over the years, and I highly recommend not focusing your trip around Amsterdam. The country really has so much more to see and do away from the typical tourist hotspots. In fact, I mostly avoid Amsterdam and Rotterdam whenever I visit due to overcrowding. But no matter where you stay, I can confidently say that the 3rd queerest country in all of Europe is a spectacular place and one that is worth being on every LGBTQ person's radar. Our journey now takes us to one of the most wealthy, safe, and overall successful countries in all of human history, the always impressive Switzerland, a nation that is 16% LGBTQ, the 2nd highest in Europe. Perhaps the most interesting observation, though, from Switzerland's queer demographics is the fact that a massive 6% of its population is either trans or non-binary, the highest percent of any country in the world. Despite being incredibly queer, only 54% of those polled in Switzerland expressed support for marriage equality, which is actually below the European average. This magical alpine nation has a reputation around the world as being incredibly progressive, but it actually did not achieve marriage equality until 2022, when the question was put to a national referendum. I was in Geneva during this period and loved all the support I saw in the city towards this referendum, and these signs were in so many windows across the country. The energy in the streets was really special, to say the least. 64% of people in the country voted for marriage equality, which is higher than current polling, but still quite low in my opinion, considering how the country is often spoken of as a socially developed utopia. In terms of support for anti-discrimination measures to protect trans individuals, Ipsos found that 69% of those polled were in favor and 24% were against. Once again, slightly lower than what we have seen from other countries on this list. These less-than-ideal findings of the study also seem to match up with Switzerland's performance on Equaldex, as the country currently ranks 27th for LGBTQ rights. That there are nearly 200 countries in the world, 27th is not that bad, but honestly, it's not quite world-leading either. Still, it does have a solid record on trans rights in particular, as gender-affirming care has been legal since 1988, and changing one's legal gender has been possible without restrictions since 2022. Non-binary people are still not legally recognized, though, but hopefully this will be changing in the near future. Overall, Switzerland is a solid place to be LGBTQ for a lot of reasons. It's the most trans country on Earth, it now has pretty decent laws since 2022, after lagging behind peer countries for almost 2 decades, and public opinion, while not excellent, is still at a tolerable level. Unfortunately, though, to call Switzerland expensive would be an understatement. I was only able to visit 2 times because of some family members offering to pay for my trip in return for me being their tour guide. I would never have been able to afford it on my own. And when you combine the fact that it's wildly costly, with it only coming in 27th globally for LGBTQ rights, I can honestly say that there are better options for most queer people that are equally as safe and accepting, but without paying 30 euros for a hamburger. Still, it's an awesome place full of beauty, and if you ever have the means to visit, the second most queer and single most trans country in all of Europe, I'd say you should take that opportunity. Now, before we finish with the most LGBTQ country in all of Europe, I want to ask you personally to become a citizen of the Queer Kingdom. Your help fighting for our future and building a strong, informed community is vital in our quest of making the world a safer place for our people. You can officially join the Kingdom here on YouTube for $1 a month, which will help me make this channel my full-time focus as soon as possible. The more time I can spend on content creation, the better I can serve the community. You will also get access to some cute custom queer emojis and epic crown icons next to your comments on this channel that will change and evolve the longer you are a member, and monthly live streams are always public, but they are moved to the members-only feed afterwards. Controversial videos covering heavy subjects that are not quite YouTube friendly are also privately posted for citizens of the kingdom so that we can all stay informed. And finally, joining the Queer Kingdom here on YouTube gives you the ability to chat with me and fellow members through access to our Queer Kingdom members Discord. I look forward to meeting you and working with you to create a safer and more prosperous world for our people, one step at a time. Also, if you are planning a trip overseas and would like guidance in crafting the perfect and safest trip, please reach out to my new email, queerkingdomtravel@gmail.com. We can then set up a phone call or continue by email as we plan out a trip that is both exciting and aligns with your core values. All who are interested can find more information in the description or can contact me directly using the email on screen. But now, for the country we have all been waiting for, the champion of this list. At 17% LGBTQ, Spain holds the title as Europe's queerest country. Of these 17%, 13 are either gay, lesbian, bi, pan, or ace, and 4% are either trans or non-binary. Of those polled in Spain, 78% expressed full support of marriage equality, and just 5% voiced opposition to any recognition of queer relationships. This is the 3rd best result of any country polled, only behind Portugal and the Netherlands. On the other hand, only 76% of Spanish respondents were in favor of anti-discrimination laws protecting trans people, which is slightly higher than Germany and Switzerland, but behind the UK, the Netherlands, and France. On the subject of legislation, however, Spain really shines through, as it is currently the 3rd highest ranked country in the world for LGBTQ rights, behind only Iceland and Norway. It currently pulls off a perfect score of 100 for its laws according to Equaldex, although I will note that the accessibility of gender-affirming care and the legal recognition of non-binary people does differ by region, with Castilla y León in particular dragging its feet on trans rights. Still, as long as you avoid this region, all laws should be very nearly perfect. Oh, and here is that region on the map. You can see it's not home to any major cities, and is kind of like the Texas or Idaho of Spain, in my opinion. Now, the last time I visited Spain was back in 2019, and to be perfectly honest, I have no intention of visiting again, despite all the praises I have given the country. The primary reason is over-tourism, and the hostility of many locals, especially in Catalonia region, and the many Spanish islands. The ineffective governments in Spain, both federal and regional, have failed to build even a fraction of the affordable housing the country needs, and tourists are blamed and scapegoated for this failing of Spanish leaders. This has led to locals attacking tourists with water guns, destroying their meals, drinks, and smartphones. And there have even been reported cases of locals holding hands to block visitors from accessing beaches. And this really just scratches the surface of the anti-tourist hostilities, but it's not the focus of this video, so I will digress. If you do decide to still visit Spain in spite of this, I recommend picking a small city that gets very little tourism, because these areas are likely going to be a lot more hospitable and grateful for your business. I personally only spend my very limited money in places where I feel welcome, and if you are like me, maybe it's best to leave Spain alone, despite the fact that it is truly excellent in terms of LGBTQ laws, and is also currently the absolute most queer country in Europe. If you are watching this video as part of the 17% of people in Spain who are also part of our global community, all I can say is that you have one of the most progressive countries on Earth, and that fact in particular is definitely something to be proud of. Also, congrats on being the most LGBTQ on the continent. That is pretty epic. And now, for today's queer news story, we have two positive developments from the South American country of Brazil. The first happened on April 24th, when the country's federal Supreme Court ruled that the Brazilian city of Porto Alegre could no longer ban the use of gender-neutral language in its schools. Since 2022, the city had essentially sought to erase non-binary people and create an environment in which students and teachers alike would be intimidated into submission. But now, after the Supreme Court ruling, gender-neutral language is once again allowed. The other positive story out of Brazil happened just about a week ago, when on May 9th, the Supreme Court made the unanimous decision to legally recognize a non-binary person's request to obtain a gender-neutral ID. While many Brazilian states already allow non-binary people to have their correct gender reflected on official documentation, this is not the case for every state, as 10 still limit this to intersex individuals only. So this decision by the Supreme Court has now opened the pathway for federal recognition of non-binary people and the chance for those in these 10 states to also obtain accurate documentation. Still, it is not clear if this decision sets any official precedent or is rather a one-off decision by the court, but either way, it is a victory worth celebrating. Both of these stories from Brazil highlight the fact that while much of the world seems to be going backwards, good things still happen too, and good people in positions of power still exist, like those serving on the Brazilian Supreme Court. Thank you, friends, for watching and spending time today with me, as we seek to spread the word about important topics in the community. For those interested, you are more than welcome to stay around and join our increasingly powerful kingdom here on YouTube as we fight for our future. Until next time, QK out.